Hello everybody, welcome back to another light novel review. Today I'm talking about volume number 5 in Gakuto Mikumo's light novel series, Strike the Blood. Now, this one is part 2 of a storyline that started in volume number 4. I'm going to be honest, after reading volume number 4, I wasn't sure whether I was going to continue with this series, hence why, even though volume 6 is already out, and in fact volume 7 is coming out in September, it's why I'm so behind on catching up. I finally decided to read this one and continue at least until volume 7 because, well, volume 7 contains apparently reveals of a bunch of a storyline that I've been very interested in with this series. But let's talk about this volume right now. So in this volume, we are now dealing with the sort of fallout of the prison break. Of course, volume number 4 led up to this whole thing and ended with a whole bunch of magically powered criminals escaping from a very special type of prison. And now in this volume, we are dealing with the outcome of that. The prisoners are hunting Natsuki, the Witch of the Void, who finds herself without powers, and she is being hunted by these criminals because in order for them to fully free themselves from the influence of the prison, she has to be killed. But then we also have our other sort of main antagonist in this whole thing, Aya, and well, she has sort of a mission of her own, wanting to finish what she started 10 years before the story began. Of course, it is up to Kojo and his friends to try and foil the plans of all these villains and to protect Natsuki in her incredibly vulnerable form. Throughout the book, there are a lot of hints dropped about things about this world and things about these main characters that suggest there's a lot more going on than what we initially assume. I think the thing about Strike the Blood that sort of turned me off initially was that it really felt like it was going to become a Monster of the Week type series. And not just a Monster of the Week, but add on top of that the whole, in order to beat the Monster of the Week, I'll drink the blood of some new girl that will expand my harem to ridiculous proportions, and every week will just be a matter of which girl am I drinking from this week, and which, beast vassal am I going to awaken that'll beat the bad guy this time. This volume plays with that a little bit. I won't say that it entirely doesn't result in a very similar sort of idea, but it does play it up a little bit differently. In order, like Kojo, the one beast vassal that he ends up summoning, it helps him in a very different way than the beast vassals have in the previous volumes, which I enjoyed because it made me feel like, okay, this is mixing things up a little bit. There are some things that I really liked about this volume. There are some things that really bothered me about this volume. And I think, in general, the things that have bothered me about this volume are my complaints about the series in general. So let's start with the sort of low end of stuff because I always like to end on high notes. So the one thing that I really noticed in this book was I really don't enjoy the writing style. There are times where it sounds almost like a children's book. I was going to try and go through this and find a very specific sort of type of paragraphs to illustrate, but I would really just generalize it by saying the way that he writes is that he will start describing someone. The girl was this and that and this and that and this and that. It was Yukina! And I'm like, no crap, it was Yukina. Like, why are you saying this like it's a kid's book? Like, oh, the bear that wasn't really a bear walked on 4 feet, was black and white in coloring, but moved at a slow and relaxed pace. It was a panda! Like, yeah, that happens numerous times through this book, and I really found it irritating. I thought to myself, it's so unnecessary for you to do that, for you to point out the obvious, especially when you've gone to the trouble of writing several sentences that make it obvious who this person is. Why even bother describing it? Why just not say, all of a sudden Yukina appeared? End of story. So yeah, I mean, the writing style I'm not a massive fan of. for the most part, it's pretty serviceable. Like, it's not that it's unreadable. I just find that at times it's that whole, we've talked about it before, showing and telling, right? And he starts to show, but then ruins the whole thing by being so blunt and telling us that I feel like, yeah, you're writing for 5-year-olds. So the writing style got a little bit under my skin on this one. And it's funny, I don't really remember it being so blatantly obvious or painful to me in the other volumes. I kind of wonder if it's because I've taken such a longer break from Strike the Blood, and I've read some really well-written light novels. I mean, I won't say all of them have been well-written, but there have been some that I have really thought were very well-written. And so I guess maybe it's making some of the flaws in this one, and again, this is my personal taste, but it's making it a little bit more pronounced to me because I've seen other books where things are handled so much better in terms of just the writing style. The other thing that I would say really kind of bothers me about this is the characters. And it's not to say that I hate the characters. I don't. In fact, when I read the first volume, I said one of the things I really enjoyed about this series was that sort of banter back and forth between Kojo and Yukina. I think part of what's bothering me now is that we're in Volume 5 and there has been almost no progress in terms of the characters' development. There really is no progress in their self-awareness. Yukina and Kojo's relationship seems to be sort of constantly put on the back burner because we have to introduce a brand new girl for, again, to satisfy my whole thing, new cute girl to drink her blood to get new beast vassal to beat monster of the week. It's like, I think that's the kind of thing that really bothered me. I mean, writing style is one thing, you can not really like the way something's written, but if the story's really good and the characters are very compelling, you can kind of get over it. But for me, the problem is that the characters are just stagnant, and because we're introducing so many, I mean, there's so many girls that we can't even include them all in a book at this point. So it just feels like there's not enough development. I mean, stop having Kojo be so clueless about what's so obvious around him. Stop having Yukina be so stoic and cold, and, have her stop, berating Kojo because, to save his life, he had to drink a girl's blood, and in order to do that, he had to get a little aroused. Yeah, maybe that's one of the other things about this series is the really, really overt sexualization of it. It really doesn't need to be there. I'd kind of like to see Kojo move a little bit beyond that. I mean, in this one, there's a girl is almost sexually assaulted in order to get to the point where Kojo's like, all right, it's on. Yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, it's one thing to have the little sort of ecchi type bits that slip in every now and then. I mean, even I was talking in Another World with my smartphone, which is a very benign series, even it can't help itself but have a little bit of ecchi in it. But this one, making it part of sort of the main plot point and let's beat the crap out of Kojo and now it's time for girls to get naked. You're using that as justification. Again, that's a little story thing that bothers me, but it's a big part of this novel series, and I kind of wish we'd move beyond it. So, okay, I've obviously been talking a lot about stuff that are very negatives about this book, so why the hell do I even want to read Volume 6 or 7? Well, there is a couple of things that happen in this book that, in my opinion, somewhat redeem the series enough that certainly have me a little bit interested in going a little bit further and seeing what happens. So the very first thing, of course, is, I can't tell you specifics because they're spoilers, but first of all, there is a very interesting sort of philosophical thought experiment that is mentioned in this book that starts to question the nature of this world and its existence and why it behaves the way it does and why are there certain conditions and certain existences within this world that seem very contrary to the way any world should actually function. It poses a lot of questions that I sat there and I thought to myself, well, either this thing's going to get really meta and start like breaking fourth walls and start talking about authors and writers and stories and books, or it is actually kind of introducing a fairly big potential plot thread about the nature of the existence of this world. To me, that makes me curious. That makes me interested in this series. And that's, I think, in addition, of course, to just my curiosity about what is the backstory about Kojo? What's the backstory about his sister? How did Kojo become the fourth primogenitor? He's lost memories about all of this, and those are supposedly being revealed in Volume 7, which is the reason that I want to get through this, and I've ordered Volume 6 so I can get caught up, so I can read Volume 7, because that has been an ongoing plot thread that I have been very curious about and interested to see how it plays out. And I think for me, that's kind of the point where I decide on this series. If that gets sort of played out in a half-assed kind of way, and in a way that seems ridiculous or doesn't make a lot of sense or isn't very interesting, I think that will probably be the end of Strike the Blood for me. If, on the other hand, it plays in to sort of the world-building events that happened in this book, and sort of they start tying and blending together, it could make the series a lot more interesting. So this is sort of a wait-and-see series to me. There are certain elements that I enjoy. I mean, you can't argue there are like some very good action sequences. The world building continues to be sort of a strong point. Like I said, even in this book, it goes even further into a philosophical debate about the world and its ground rules and the existences within the world. So the world itself has always been kind of interesting to me. And of course, like I said, Kojo and everything else. And as much as I complain that the characters aren't really growing as much as I would like or had hoped, there were some glimmers in this volume. There were some glimmers that made me go, maybe we're going to start taking some steps forward. And I would very much like to see that. I like these characters at their sort of base levels, but I would like to see their relationships with each other grow, and for us not to feel constantly like we're forcing these characters to behave in a very stagnant manner that really doesn't make sense given all the things that they have now experienced together. So Strike the Blood continues to be kind of a mixed bag series for me. Certainly has some interesting plot points and such, but obviously I outlined very clearly some of the things that left me a little bit meh on this book. I'm very curious to see what Volume 6 is like. I actually just received that today as I'm recording this video. So it'll be interesting to see sort of how things go. And definitely Volume 7, if we're going to start getting some reveals about what's going on, that's really going to be the point where I think I judge this series and decide whether the plot and the story threads are going to be strong and interesting enough to keep me going ahead, or whether maybe this is going to get one to be shelved in favor of other series. So those are my thoughts on volume number 5 of Strike the Blood that has sat on my shelf for many a week or even month at this point. The next book that I am going to be reviewing, I decided that, there are a couple series that I have never visited, even though they have been available and are considered fairly big series. And so I'm going to be reviewing The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. This one, of course, has a pretty big following, and what's really cool is that the entire series is available in English right now. This was one of the first series that Yen On, actually I don't even know if they were Yen On at that point. I think they were still just under Yen Press. They hadn't split it off into the Yen On, Yen Press banners at that point. This is going back to I think 2008 that they started releasing this series in English, so you can actually pick up the entire series right now. So going to be kind of interesting. I want to go back and take a look at this older series, one that has a really good fan base following, and like I said, it's all available right now. If you read the first one and you really like it, you don't have to wait for months and months and months before you can even continue with the second volume. So that'll be my next review. So if you're brand new to the channel and you love light novels, don't forget to subscribe to check out all of my future light novel reviews, and I do a bunch of other light novel related type videos on this channel as well. Thank you all for joining me in this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Till then, bye-bye for now.